I'm here with my great friend, John Zarrella. We've known each other for a long time, worked together for a while. John, thank you for being with me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
This is
Martin.
the first time I've done this, so be gentle. You know, it's kind of funny how you woke up 3, 4 days ago. You woke up in Florida, landed in Austin. I picked you up. We drove to the middle of nowhere, a little town called Sanderson, Texas.
Yes, we did. Population 693.
What does that tell you about the life we live as journalists?
Well, I mean, it just tells you that in a drop of a hat, you can be anywhere at any time. And in fact, in this particular case, and in my particular case, after all the years that I've been in the business, I have the luxury now of, picking and choosing what I want to do, when I want to do it. And so it's different now than it was when, I was with CNN for 32 years. And, you always had to have your bag packed at the door, ready to go. Even if you were on vacation, you weren't necessarily immune, from being called off a vacation or off a holiday weekend, and you had to do what was dictated. If it meant traveling, it meant traveling.
You can be more selective about the stories you
Now
cover.
I can, yeah, and it's been that way for 10 years now for me, which is great. I mean, I love it, and I love the fact that I am able now to do what's called long form. So we do pieces that are 10, 12 minutes long, as opposed to 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. So there's more substance to what we do.
If you could talk to 19, 20-year-old John Zarrella, what would you say right now?
Well, look, 19, 20-year-old John Zarrella was very fortunate. I was going to a small college in Miami. And long story short, had an internship at a local TV station in Miami, Channel 10, WPLG. And from that internship, I ended up the news director, Dick Williams, the late Dick Williams, a wonderful human being. He hired me as his weekend assignment editor and weekend noon news producer. They had news at noon on Saturdays and Sundays. And I always tell the story that the only reason Dick Williams hired me in the first place was for the news department basketball team, because they were short of people and they needed a young guy out there, right? So that's always what I say when people say, why would Williams hire you? You had absolutely no experience. I was the college newspaper editor, and that was it. I had no television experience, and in fact, one of the veteran news anchors at the station, Ann Bishop, who was a legend in Miami, she really didn't care for me. She did not, because here I was, and had no experience, and I was writing a weekend newscast. I was way in over my head.
Like most of us when we first
When we
started.
first started. So, I mean, if you look at it, I kind of got into the business in a very, just being in the right place at the right time with the right news director, and then I worked in local television for several years more, all around Atlanta and Baltimore, West Palm Beach, back to Miami, and then finally to CNN.
That seems to happen to a lot of us. We fall into the right place at the right time.
That's a lot of what the television business, so if I was telling, 19, 20-year-old John Zarrella, I'd be sitting there going, dude, hey, I don't know where this is going to go, because I didn't know where. I had no idea. I didn't have any idea that I was going to be a television journalist.
And then you get to jump into CNN at the beginning of CNN.
Yeah, 1981, a year and a half after they went on the air.
And you went to become the #1 reporter to cover the space program in Florida.
Well,
for
I mean, there
CNN.
were others. Let's face it, I was one of several really, really talented reporters who covered the space program. John Holloman, the late John Holloman, Miles O'Brien, who's still out there kicking the can down the road, as we say. Tom Mintier, who people probably may not remember. He was early on. Tony Clark covered the space. So there were a lot of great CNN reporters. I just happened to be based in Florida. So again, it's serendipitous. You get lucky. You end up, in the right place. The shuttle program had taken off. They had launched, and now here I was, 1983, when we opened the Miami. The first 2 years I was in Atlanta as executive producer. They hired me to start a morning newscast called Daybreak.
Specifically talking about the shuttle program, there's a moment in time where you are covering for CNN one of the shuttle lunches. Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, it was, Challenger. And of course, there had been a freeze in Florida, and it was bitter, bitter cold that week. The Challenger was supposed to, and it was the Teacher in Space mission. And so we were there, and it kept getting delayed and delayed, delay a day. And there was another reinforcing freeze coming down. So, and then the launch was then scheduled for January 28th, the next day. So the night of the 27th and overnight into the 28th, we ended up going out into the orange groves. And we shot a piece in the orange groves for CNN on the freeze. And then we took our material and we had to drive it to Disney because Disney had the uplink. We had no uplink facilities, at the Kennedy Space Center. We didn't have a satellite truck back in 1986. And so we fed our piece. We figured, well, that's fine. We'll just drive back after we're done. First thing in the morning when we got finished at Disney, drive back to the Cape. We'll relax there. We'll cover the launch, file a post-launch wrap, and then we'll go home. That was our feeling. And then it wasn't our feeling anymore, And then a little after 11 o'clock in the morning when they lifted off, we were all down by what's a body of water where they would bring in a bunch of shuttle external tanks and things. It was the turn basin, and that's where the old countdown clock sits, right in front there. And the journalists, the media would all go out to the edge of the turn basin, past the clock, and that was sort of a tradition, and you watch the launch from there, and that's what we all did. And we're watching the launch, and it goes up, and there were some really veteran reporters that were out there from a lot of the United Press International, Associated Press, along with the other networks that were all out there, and we're watching as it lifts off and it goes up. And
CNN was live.
No, CNN was live, but it was live using NASA TV, and they were the only ones to be carrying it live because by then nobody, the shuttle program was considered, it's routine. We know otherwise. So we're watching it, and then all of a sudden you see this huge cloud envelop the spacecraft. And then we saw from behind the cloud what really looked like fireworks shooting out. We didn't actually see the fireball from where we were at our vantage point. Now the camera angles got that. So everybody's looking and looking and looking, and finally everybody goes, this isn't right. And they all started running back up to the press dome where the NASA officials were, where the NASA media relations people were. And as I'm running up, my photographer, Steve Sonnenblick, God rest him, Steve was there, and he had his camera, and he was looking through it, and he's watching it and watching what's going on. And I ran up to Steve, and I said, what happened? He looks away from his eyepiece. It blew up. And right away, your heart just goes, oh my God. So I ran up inside the press dome, and everybody that was already there, they're screaming and yelling, and and they're fighting with the media people at NASA to get us out to the landing strip, because they thought there was a scenario called RTLS, Return to Launch Site, and they believed that maybe the shuttle had survived and would come back and land, and the NASA folks were like, no, we're not going anywhere. We have no authorization to go anywhere. We're all staying here. It almost came down to fistfights in that press dome. And so, at that moment you just say, okay, I gotta find a phone. So I had to go use the pay phone.
Yeah, we didn't have cell phones back then.
We did not. So I'm calling Atlanta on the pay phone, and they punched me into the control room, and I did it for
Aside from the journalistic point of view, as John Zarrella, how did that make you feel?
You know, at that point, you're just basically, I don't know, you're not numb, but you're focused so much on what you have to do, what you can try to do. And remember, we had no information. It's not like we could say much of anything other than report on what the scene was like at the Space Center, with what had happened at the Space Center, what we could see from the ground with debris in the distance coming down. But we really couldn't report on much of anything else. But you're focused on that. So the human emotion part did not hit me at that point at all. And quite honestly, it did not hit me at all that day because we were just so busy trying to get information, waiting on a news conference, waiting for CNN to get us a satellite truck. So the first live shot that I did, because remember now, hundreds and hundreds of media from all over the world are calling NASA requesting credentials. So the credential office was backed up for a mile with people trying to get into the facility. So we didn't get a satellite truck, a rental truck, into the Space Center until about 8 o'clock that night, 7 o'clock that night. And remember, the accident was 11 o'clock in the morning.
They say that a lot of my friends have said that we run on adrenaline. Adrenaline just kicks in.
Yeah.
And we go on like autopilot.
Same thing, whether it's that or whether it's a hurricane, depending on the event. I mean, whether you could be in Haiti, you could be, anywhere. I was in the Middle East for a while. There were events where, your body runs on adrenaline. When you get into any kind of a tense situation, sure.
And then you go home.
Yeah.
And it hits.
Yeah. I remember very vividly, and I've told this story a few times, and people kind of shrug it off. But after Challenger, for several years after Challenger, I would have nightmares about space shuttles leaving the Kennedy Space Center and flying like right over the press site and crashing. So I mean, it's one of those weird things. And I had those repeatedly for quite a while.
Yeah, I relate to that a little bit.
Sure.
With the earthquake in Haiti in 2011.
Yeah. The Haiti earthquake, you guys, that was some story. And I relate to the earthquake in Mexico City in 1985. Yeah, like 10,000 people were dead. And
so our common friend David Waters told me a story about
cameraman.
Changing a bit of it. NASA had built a wall around you?
It wasn't around me. It was sort of like a wooden barrier that they erected, and they put me on one side of it, and we were facing a launch pad it was because my voice carries, and all the other journalists were not happy with the fact that every time they were trying to do something live, my voice would be interfering with their live shots. So NASA, for this particular launch where we were all clustered together looking out at I think it was a Delta rocket or something, a Delta launch pad. And so they erected this wooden barrier. It might have been about 15 feet long and about 8 feet high, just so that my crew and I would be on one side of it to do our reports, and all the other folks would be over on the other side. So yeah, that was kind of unique.
You had your own special place.
Yes, they gave me my own special place at the Space Center.
That's good.
Yeah.
How would you describe the life that the journalists like us? Because journalism has changed. In today's world, we're still out there, but it's very different from the 80s and 90s, how we cover stories.
Well, I think it is for some people. I think it's not so much that it's what we cover is different, because I think if you look at the networks, whether it's the three ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox, whatever, any of those networks, MSNBC, I think when it comes to covering big news events, they still do all of that. The thing about what's changed is that there's so much other noise that's in there from social media and everything else. And everybody's got a camera. And so,
or a
right?
phone.
Or, yeah, camera phone, and so from that standpoint, in some ways it's good because a lot more stuff is being captured, video than was ever captured back in our day. Our day, it's still our day, but it's still there's a lot more being captured.
What is it that you say? We're still kicking the can.
Yeah, she's still kicking the can down the road, buddy. We're still
We got about 10 more years.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
So you've covered you've the variety of stories that you've covered around in your professional lifetime made you this very well rounded kind of person.
Well, you know what they called me for a while? Ed Turner, the great Ed Turner, late great Ed Turner. He used to call me his fireman. So anytime there was a major breaking story, it was, send Zarrella. Where's Zarrella? We got to get in.
You got to go put out the fire.
Got to put out the fire. So.
That makes you a more well-around person. You see things differently. I mean, I've been with you when you interview people, and you're so well-versed in what you want to talk to people, how you want to ask the questions. People like you. They just normally like you.
That was one. It's just the way I approach reporting. It doesn't mean it's the only way to do it, and for some people that wouldn't work. For me, it works. I am able to just have a real nice conversation with somebody, and generally I get what I need from the interviews without being abrasive and confrontational.
How did you balance at that time with the work life with the personal life? It's hard for a lot of us.
Oh God, yes, it's difficult. You're fortunate if you have, a good companion who understands it all. My wife was left raising our two sons, and then our two sons and two daughters, and I was never around. I was gone a lot, and I mean a lot. So, that's I think the most important thing is having someone who understands, going in, that this is the way it is. And you got to be able to understand that and accept that. So that's the most important thing is,
they need to know who they're getting in with before they get in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Don't sugarcoat it, because it's the reality.
No. My wife knew what she was getting into, so she ended up taking care of the kids also.
See?
I was always traveling.
Exactly.
So which would you say is, aside from the Challenger story, which I think is probably up there, which would you say is a story that made a change in you?
I don't know that anything changed me, Martine. I don't think I ever changed. I think stories that may have impacted, it would have been things like hurricanes, like Katrina, like Hurricane Andrew, which was a massive one in South Florida, 1992. I think the Mexico City earthquake I already mentioned, the Cuban rafters crisis, being in Cuba, when the rafters were building their rafts and walking down, to the ocean to put their rafts in right in front of us. We're recording all this. In fact, there's a great story about that. Larry Register, who was, director of coverage on the international desk for a lot of years, he was with me for the rafters crisis. So was Bernard Shaw. He was down there because he went down there to get an interview with Fidel Castro, which he never got. It never came through. So I was doing most of the daily reporting, and he would come in and do an anchor hit for later in the day. But one of the stories we have is there was one day when we were live in Havana del Este on the beach, and these rafters, we're waiting to go live. We were using Cuban television microwave truck, sending the signal back to there, and then up on like 2 or 3 satellite bounces, whatever, to get the signal back to the U.S. So these rafters are carrying this raft down to the water. And Larry's in the truck, and I'm on camera outside the truck, and I see them coming. And Larry looks, and he sees them, and I'm yelling at Larry. I'm like, they got to take us. They got to take us now. We got this incredibly great opportunity right now. So Larry's on the phone with the producer, who shall remain nameless. And this producer is like, no, I can't come to you now. We're tied into something. We got something else. We can't break away and come to you now. And it's like, really? You're missing this opportunity because your show is formatted so stiffly that you don't want to cut out of whatever you're doing to get this incredible, video, and me maybe asking them a couple of questions as they're walking by us. So finally, and Larry's like red. He is so furious with them, and he's screaming at him on the phone in the control room, and I'm screaming at Larry. And so by the time they finally said, okay, we're done with that story, we'll come to you now, these rafters are way the hell down on the beach. It's like, so you sit there and you go, what? I mean, and that kind of stuff happened. Now, most producers are pretty agile. They'll make the right decision. But that's one that's always stuck in my craw for all these years. Since 1994 was the rafters crisis, I think, if I remember right.
You told me a story that happened in Haiti when you were covering Baby Duck. I find it hilarious.
No, actually, the Baby Doc story, that didn't happen. Baby Doc, we were there. That was right after Challenger. A week after, not even, maybe 5 days. We get a call, you got to go to Haiti. Baby Doc is he's leaving the country. We got you a Lear jet. So get back to Miami right away. Drive back to Miami, 3 hours. Right to it's again, like I said, you never knew where you were going to be.
Back to
right?
go.
Let's go. I wasn't married at the time, so it was a little bit easier. Go. Hop on the Lear jet. We go to Haiti, and we managed at one point to get a shot of Baby Doc in his caravan heading out, leaving to go to the airport. But the story you're referring to was another of the many trips down to Haiti, where there was a big protest by the people against the interim government or the government, whatever the heck it was. And they're all marching down the street. And we were kind of in the middle of this caravan of people. A lot of the other network crews were in the front of the group of the caravanners.
But in my experience, Haiti has always been extremely dangerous and
absolutely,
pretty much no man's land when you're out on the streets.
Yeah, and that's what happened that afternoon. The Tantamakut, which was this horrible group of basically government thugs.
Assassination squads.
Yeah, they came out right into the middle of this front of this procession of people, and they started firing and killing people right there on the street. So bodies are falling, but it's down from us. We're in the middle of this, 500 people, 1,000 people, whatever it was. And as that's happening, everybody starts running. They're all running in the other direction. So we end up hiding behind some big concrete pillars as, bullets are flying. And, a couple, there weren't many that came close, but there were a few that hit pillars around us. And we're like, and somebody in one of the little apartments there was going to have, come on in. We were like, no, we'll get out of here. So we get out of there. We did not get any shots of, the people who had passed away, who had been killed. So, but that's one of those moments where you talk about adrenaline kicking in, and we're like, man, we got to get out of here. Let's get back to the hotel, which was an old Holiday Inn, famous old Holiday Inn, right there in downtown Port-au-Prince. So we get into the hotel, and I had to send a telex. That's what they had back then.
What was a telex?
You just wrote something, and it got sent electronically.
We still don't know how it worked, but it worked.
I don't know how the heck it works. I had to use those in Egypt, too, when I was in Egypt. Those are other stories. But I sent the note to the international desk, and I said, hey, there's been this parade, procession. A lot of people were shot, unfortunately, and that's kind of weird to say this, right? But it was like, I'm sorry we didn't get any of that kind of video because we were back into the procession. And I said, but they were firing at us and shooting at everybody. And I just wanted you guys, to know this. And I got a one-word response back, duck. That was what the international, they were so compassionate back in those days.
You think?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Working 20 hours and then, going to sleep for 3 and then go back to work.
There
were different days, right?
Most of those were during hurricanes, but yeah.
But they were fun.
A lot of them. Yeah, it was a fun. It was great. It's to me though, it's still a young person's business doing that.
Yeah.
Doing that kind of stuff. If you're running and gunning and
Tyrone Edwards.
Absolutely, cameraman from
right.
CNN. He was.
Yeah, I was talking to Tyrone last week, and we were talking about how the business has changed and how now, we go out, we get hired by a network, and we set up a live shot. We do a bunch of live shots, maybe a soundbite or two, and then we go back to the hotel and take a break.
Well, and that's part of it, as you were saying, about how the business has changed.
Yeah, but the point that Tyrone made was, it was really funny. Tyrone was, I kind of like that better, man. I'm too old to be running around.
Well, exactly. And that's the way that the business has changed to the extent that everybody wants to be live. Just be live. We used to do that all the time during hurricanes. You'd have like 5 satellite trucks stretched out over 100 miles of coastline, so you made sure that you were pretty close to where it was going to make landfall with at least one of your crews.
At least one crew was near.
Yep, exactly.
How was covering hurricanes back in the day?
Oh, jeez. It was, we did it in all sorts of ways. Before the satellite trucks and all, we followed hurricanes all the way from South Florida all the way up the East Coast. Just going from one city, literally driving, and the storms would be off, one that was offshore going up the coastline. And we'd stop and we'd try to get ahead of it. And we'd file a story from someplace or go in and do a live shot at some, local TV affiliate that had the live capabilities that, we could get the signal back to CNN. And so we did it that way sometimes. Other times it was, you'd go hook up with a live truck when we started getting live trucks, and you'd go to where the storm you thought was a good place to be. And then maybe it wasn't such a good place to be because the storm was changing. And you'd end up, moving. Let's drive over here. Let's drive, we have to change location so we can get closer to where the center of the storm is coming ashore. And, the people particularly at emergency management people were like, these guys are crazy. But it's true, though. The fact is that, and you can see it today, it hasn't changed. The networks, no matter who it is, whether it's anybody that has live crews covering weather, they want their people out in the middle of the storm.
Yeah, we were a bit crazy, didn't we? We did
still
crazy
are.
stuff.
But I get it. They've changed. They wear their hard hats and their helmets, and they got their goggles and stuff. And even I've seen them in vests. And
well, a lot of it's the regulations nowadays. From working out in the fires in New Mexico 2-3 weeks ago, they wouldn't let him go into the fire zone unless he was wearing a bright
Correct.
yellow.
Yep. We had to have those on occasions to go cover fires when I had to go to California and cover fires for CNN.
But the technology has changed. Everything has changed. We're downsized so much. It's incredible. We can roll in a minute and survive out of a vehicle.
The technology is terrific, but at the same time, some of the portable live capabilities, you still can't use that stuff in a hurricane.
No, you can't.
That ain't happening.
No, you have to use Starlink these days. Is I think what they use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I don't even know anymore what they use. And even back in the day, it was
we still use the satellite truck.
Stand me in front of in front of the camera with a satellite truck, and I'll be happy.
If you go into a hurricane zone right now, you go look for the satellite. There's a satellite truck that has an alligator, I believe. You've probably seen it. It's from Florida. They're famous.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they're always
Yes,
out
they
there.
are.
We're always looking for that guy.
Yeah,
because he's always there.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
he is.
Tell me a little bit about that.
About what?
I think that's a really interesting story that you chose to do about Debbie Traynor. Who's Debbie Traynor?
Oh, she was a Mexican-American woman. Grew up not far from where we are in Pasadena, Texas, not California. And she basically got herself up from her bootstraps and, worked her way through. She went to the Texas Air National Guard, and then she ended up getting a degree, and she managed to find her way to NASA, in accounting, worked her way up at NASA, got a master's degree in the process of working at NASA, and became an astronaut trainer. So she literally would be training astronauts on specific things that had to do with their flights. She's now retired. And she wrote a book called From Tortillas to Astronauts. And when I saw that story, I felt like, this is a wonderful story. And so we're going to have a conversation with her tomorrow, and a conversation with an astronaut who worked with her on at least one of his missions.
And who's now the mayor of a small town.
And now he's the mayor of he could be a story. But so anyway, that was. So again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. At this point in time, this stage of my career, I pick and choose what I want to do. If the network says to me, CGTN, says to me, hey, how about this story? I can say yes or no.
And we've done some interesting stories. Last year we were at Yellowstone National Park.
We were at
a couple of months
Salt
ago.
Lake City. We were in New Orleans last year.
I love that story, by the way.
The New Orleans story was wonderful.
Yeah.
You're teasing people who haven't seen it.
Hey.
They're going to have to go look for it.
They're going to have to go look for it.
CGTN America.
Yeah, there
look
you
for
go.
The New Orleans piece. That was
Jose is really going to like you for that one.
Yeah, no, that was a great story.
Yeah, that was a really good story. I think that was a really good story.
Yeah.
And David Waters, who was cameraman in that story, I think he made an outstanding editing process and video.
Every time I look at one of our stories, there are times when I say, okay, that was okay. And then, there's other times when I say, oh, man, that was really, really good.
The opening sequence, I'm not going to give it away.
The New Orleans sequence.
The New Orleans sequence. It was great.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
I loved
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So remember, folks, go to CGTN America and look up my name, and then look for the New Orleans story. And you'll see all the other stuff we've done, too, if you're interested.
Thank you, John. I
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime.